Junkyard Dog wasn't just another wrestling character, he was a force of nature. With his thick chains, barking persona, and explosive energy, he brought something completely different to the ring. When that music hit and he came strutting out, the crowd didn't just cheer, they erupted. Whether you saw him on TV or were lucky enough to be in the building, Junkyard Dog had a presence that couldn't be ignored. But what made him so memorable wasn't just the growl or the headbutts. It was the way he connected. Kids, adults, people from all walks of life, everyone rooted for him. He was their hero, their fighter, their man in the ring who didn't back down. But like too many heroes in the world of wrestling, Junkyard Dog's story didn't have a happy ending. He wasn't supposed to fade out quietly, let alone die tragically on a lonely stretch of road. And yet, that's exactly what happened. One moment, he was a father, a former champion, just trying to live his life. And the next, he was gone. No cameras, no big send-off, just silence. The kind of silence that hits harder than any clothesline ever could. What went wrong? How did a man who once ruled the ring with unmatched charisma end up in the background, remembered more for his fall than his glory? This story isn't just about a wrestling gimmick. It's about Sylvester Ritter, the man behind Junkyard Dog and the slow, painful decline that too few saw coming. If you think you know his story, think again. Because behind the bark was a man carrying a weight far heavier than any chain he ever wore. Before he was Junkyard Dog, he was just Sylvester Ritter, a college football player with size, strength, and a dream. Born in Wadesboro, North Carolina, and raised in the South, Sylvester's early life was shaped by discipline and sports. He had a sharp mind, earning a political science degree, and the body of a powerhouse. But his path to stardom didn't begin in a wrestling ring. It started on the football field. Ritter was an offensive lineman and a good one. He played at Fayetteville State University, where he helped lead his team to championship success. For a while, it seemed like the NFL might be in his future, but life had other plans. Injuries and missed opportunities closed the door on pro football, and Ritter found himself at a crossroads. He didn't sulk. He didn't stop dreaming. Instead, he found something new, something even more powerful. He entered the world of professional wrestling. In the late 1970s, Ritter began training and wrestling in small promotions across the South. He was raw, but hungry. His size alone made him stand out, but it was his attitude that made people take notice. He moved differently. He carried himself with confidence, and he understood how to make a crowd care. It wasn't long before promoters realized they had something special, but it wasn't until he arrived in Mid-South Wrestling under promoter Bill Watts that Ritter truly transformed. Watts saw the potential and gave him a character that would change his life forever. The Junkyard Dog was born. It was more than just a gimmick. JYD came to the ring with a dog collar, chain in hand, and an attitude that demanded attention. His entrance music, Queen's Another One Bites the Dust, set the tone. Fans exploded when he stepped through the curtain. Kids danced in the aisles. Adults cheered with full hearts. He wasn't just entertaining, he was empowering. What made JYD so magnetic was that he didn't need complex moves or wild promos. He had raw energy, he had presence, and in a region still healing from racial tension, here was a black man in the main event, being cheered by everyone. He crossed lines that few had before. In the Deep South, JYD became the face of the promotion. That was unheard of. He didn't play to stereotypes. He didn't let the business define him. He defined it. Night after night, arena after arena, JYD packed the house. He wrestled legends like Ted DiBiase and Butch Reed in matches that fans still talk about today. He was a hero to many, especially to young black fans who finally saw someone who looked like them winning on the big stage. That mattered a lot. By the early 80s, he had become one of the most popular wrestlers in the entire country. The transformation from Sylvester Ritter to Junkyard Dog wasn't just about a name change, it was a rebirth. He had found his calling, his people, and his place in history. JYD wasn't just a product of his time. He helped define it. Before we continue with the video and dive deeper into the issues with Junkyard Dog's tragic decline, I'd love to ask for your support. I'm working towards reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription would mean a lot. If you enjoy this content, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps. All right, let's get back to it. By the time Junkyard Dog arrived on the national stage, his presence was already electric. The WWF in the mid-1980s was exploding into pop culture, and Vince McMahon was building a roster of unforgettable personalities. When Sylvester Ritter stepped into that environment as Junkyard Dog, he didn't just fit in, he stood out. His charisma, timing, and connection with fans were undeniable, and in a sea of colorful characters, JYD brought something more grounded. He brought soul. In his earliest WWF appearances, Junkyard Dog quickly became a fan favorite. He didn't need long promos or flashy storylines. All it took was a stomp into the ring, a shake of the ropes, and that confident glare into the crowd. The audience responded every single time. Whether it was kids, adults, or entire families, people genuinely loved him. That kind of popularity can't be faked. It has to be earned, and he had done the work long before arriving on the big stage. JYD was a staple of WWF programming throughout the mid-1980s. He appeared on Saturday night's main event, competed in pay-per-views like WrestleMania, and battled some of the company's most notorious villains. His feud with Harley Race was particularly memorable. The clash wasn't wide. What made his rise even more impressive was the era he was navigating. During a time when wrestling rarely gave top billing to black performers, Junkyard Dog broke barriers. He wasn't pushed aside or relegated to the background. He was center stage. He main-evented shows, sold tickets, and carried the energy of the crowd without needing a belt around his waist. In many ways, he paved the way for future stars of color by proving they could draw, entertain, and inspire on the highest level. Despite not holding a world title in WWF, his impact was undeniable. JYD captured the Wrestling Classic Tournament title in 1985, one of the company's early PPV events, and continued to be featured in high-profile matches for years. What he lacked in championship gold, he made up for in presence. Promoters knew they could count on him to deliver an emotional reaction, and few wrestlers of that era had his level of crowd control. He also became known for his signature style. The dog collar, the chains, the thumping music, it was all part of the package. But more than that, he had a natural rhythm in the ring. His matches might have been simple in structure, but they told clear stories. Whether he was getting beat down or making a comeback, you knew when to cheer, when to boo, and when to rise to your feet. As the decade moved forward, Junkyard Dog's role in WWF began to change. New stars were rising, and younger talent started getting the spotlight. But even as the main event opportunities faded, JYD remained a beloved figure, never fully stepping out of the fans' hearts. As bright as Junkyard Dog's stars shone in the wrestling world, his personal life began to slip into shadows. Fame came fast and hard, and so did the lifestyle that often accompanied it. Long nights, relentless travel, constant pressure to stay relevant. It all chipped away at the man behind the character. Sylvester Ritter was admired by millions, but few knew the struggle he was quietly enduring. Years of taking bumps in the ring, performing night after night, and pushing his body without proper rest or recovery began to wear him down. Wrestling in the 80s wasn't known for looking after its stars. There were no wellness policies, no consistent medical oversight, only the expectation to perform, no matter the pain. JYD, like many of his peers, leaned on painkillers and other substances to make it through the grind. What started as a way to manage the wear and tear gradually turned into dependency. At the same time, his momentum in the ring started to slow. As new faces emerged in the WWF, JYD's role shifted further down the card. The spark that once made him the heartbeat of arenas began to fade. Not because he lost his ability to connect, but because the business moved on without sentiment. The attention, the adoration, the bookings, they all began to dwindle. Outside the ring, his personal relationships suffered. The constant road life meant limited time with family. The fame that had once been a dream became isolating. Ritter was known to be kind-hearted and generous, but as his struggles grew, so did the distance between him and the people closest to him. He became harder to reach both physically and emotionally. He found work in smaller wrestling promotions during the early 1990s, but the magic wasn't the same. The big crowds were gone, the spotlight dimmed. Fans still respected him, but the world had changed. For JYD, the applause had grown quieter, and that silence cut deeper than any fall in the ring. Even appearances that were meant to celebrate his legacy started to feel bittersweet. He'd show up for independent events, sign autographs, and smile for photos. But behind the scenes, the years of physical abuse and emotional toll had clearly taken their mark. His once mighty frame had shrunk. The bark in his voice still carried power, but the fire behind his eyes wasn't as bright. He never publicly complained. He didn't beg for attention, but anyone paying attention could see that Junkyard Dog, the man who once danced and barked in front of thousands, was struggling just to stay upright. The pain wasn't just physical anymore. It had settled deeper into his spirit. Sylvester Ritter had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that in wrestling, the show always goes on, but sometimes the ones who gave us everything are left behind when the curtain falls. Junkyard Dog was still a legend, no question, but behind the legacy was a man fighting battles no crowd could ever see. The day Junkyard Dog died didn't start with headlines or fanfare. It was just another afternoon, just another drive. On June 2nd, 1998, Sylvester Ritter was on the road, returning from his daughter's high school graduation in North Carolina. He had made the trip to be there for her, a proud father looking to celebrate a major milestone in her life. The journey back to Mississippi should have been uneventful, a quiet ride after an emotional family moment. But somewhere along Interstate 20 near Forest, Mississippi, everything changed. Ritter's car veered off the road. According to reports, he lost control of his vehicle, and it flipped. The crash was violent and sudden. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. The man who had once filled arenas with thunderous energy was gone. He was only 45 years old. The news hit fans and the wrestling community like a punch to the chest. For many, it felt unreal. How could someone so full of life, so etched into their memories, be taken just like that? Ritter wasn't headlining anymore, but his name still carried weight. People remembered the bark, the chain, the charisma, and now they were left with silence. There was no elaborate tribute show, no massive media rollout. Ritter didn't pass under the bright lights. He died alone on a highway. The kind of ending that feels too quiet for someone who had once been so loud, so alive. But that's often the way it goes for wrestlers of his era. They give everything to the ring, and when the spotlight fades, the rest of the world keeps moving. His daughter, who had just walked the stage for graduation, was now mourning her father. That contrast, celebration one day, tragedy the next, cut deeper than most can imagine. Junkyard Dog's final act wasn't in a match or a speech. It was in showing up for his child, proving that even through the chaos, he still cared. When the news of Junkyard Dog's death broke, it didn't just stay within wrestling circles, it spread fast. Shockwaves rippled through the community. It wasn't just that Sylvester Ritter had passed away. It was the way it happened. One moment, he was alive, a proud father celebrating his daughter's big day, and the next, he was gone. For fans who had grown up watching him, it felt like losing a piece of their childhood. Tributes began pouring in, not from corporate press releases, but from the people who knew him. The wrestlers who had shared the locker room, the fans who had danced to his theme song, and the announcers who once hyped his entrances with genuine excitement. Ric Flair, who had once battled him in Mid-South, spoke publicly about Ritter's charisma and how he could ignite a crowd like few others. Jim Ross, one of wrestling's most respected voices, called him one of the most important talents of the territory era and a true fan favorite who never lost touch with the audience. Fans across the country took to message boards and early wrestling forums to share memories. Some posted photos from autograph signings. Others recalled being kids in the crowd, jumping to their feet when JYD entered the arena. They didn't just remember his matches, they remembered how he made them feel. What stood out in all the tributes wasn't just admiration, it was sadness. Not just because he died, but because so many felt like he hadn't been properly celebrated while he was alive. He was a pioneer, a trailblazer for black wrestlers in a time when representation was rare, yet his later years were spent far from the spotlight he once owned. Even without a tribute episode or Hall of Fame segment, the reaction made one thing clear: Junkyard Dog mattered. He wasn't just another wrestler who came and went. He left a mark. His memory wasn't tied to titles or stats. It was tied to impact. And the voices that rose up after his passing ensured that impact wouldn't be forgotten. Junkyard Dog didn't just make a name for himself, he changed the landscape of wrestling. His legacy isn't measured by championship belts or win-loss records. It's defined by what he represented and how he shattered barriers. At a time when black wrestlers were often pushed into the background, JYD stood front and center. He didn't ask for a spotlight, he earned it. And once it was his, he never let go. He was one of the first black wrestlers to consistently headline in major promotions without being cast as a stereotype. He wasn't comic relief or a background figure. He was the main event. In Mid-South Wrestling, he drew crowds that filled arenas, not just because of his look or entrance music, but because fans believed in him. He made people feel something, and that feeling stuck with them long after the shows ended. Future stars like Booker T, Mark Henry, and Big E have all acknowledged Junkyard Dog as a trailblazer. He opened doors they would eventually walk through. For many young black fans in the 80s, he was the first wrestler they could see themselves in. That mattered. It still does. His style, though simple, became iconic. The dog collar, the chains, the crowd interaction, it all became part of a template others would follow. More than that, he proved that you didn't need to be flashy in the ring if your presence was strong enough. He taught the importance of showmanship, connection, and authenticity. Even today, when his name comes up, there's a certain reverence. Wrestling schools show his matches to students. Fans wear retro JYD shirts to live events. Documentaries mention him when discussing the evolution of wrestling's golden era. He may have left the ring years ago, but his shadow still stretches across it. Junkyard Dog wasn't just a performer. He was a movement. One that didn't end with his last match, but keeps inspiring every time a new wrestler grabs a mic, steps through the ropes, and tries to win over a crowd. For years after his death, fans and wrestlers alike asked the same question: why wasn't Junkyard Dog in the WWE Hall of Fame? It wasn't just a casual thought, it became a serious topic within the wrestling world. How could someone so influential, someone who had carried entire promotions on his back, still be left out of the industry's most recognized honor? The debate wasn't about stats or championships. It was about impact. Junkyard Dog had changed the game for wrestlers of color, proved he could sell tickets, and help bring pro wrestling into homes that had never tuned in before. He wasn't just another name on the roster, he was a cornerstone of the golden era. Fans began speaking out. Wrestling blogs, fan sites, and interviews with retired wrestlers all made the case. Some believed the delay was simply due to WWE's tendency to prioritize headline-grabbing inductees. Others wondered if his troubled final years played a role, if the industry was slow to embrace someone whose life had ended quietly, away from the spotlight. In 2004, the wait finally ended. Junkyard Dog was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame posthumously. The moment was emotional, long overdue, and powerful. His daughter accepted the honor on his behalf, standing in front of a crowd that roared with love and respect. For many fans, it felt like closure. Still, some believe he should have been inducted while he was alive to witness it. The delay remains a point of debate, a reminder of how wrestling sometimes forgets its own legends, until the silence becomes too loud to ignore. Junkyard Dog's story doesn't follow the typical wrestling arc. There was no farewell tour, no final speech under bright lights. But maybe that's what makes it more human. He rose from small-town roots to become a national icon. He inspired crowds, broke barriers, and gave people something real to believe in. Even when the spotlight faded, his influence didn't. He was more than just a wrestler. He was a symbol of pride, of strength, and of connection. From packed arenas in New Orleans to WrestleMania matches on the national stage, JYD left his mark without ever needing to shout for it. And even in his final years through pain and struggle, he stayed true to himself. His legacy isn't built on how he died. It's built on how he made people feel while he was here. Now, I want to hear from you. What moment do you remember most about Junkyard Dog? Was it his entrance, a match, or the way he inspired others? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear them. And if this video gave you something new, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell. I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps keep these stories alive. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.